Committee will be in order. I want to let all the members know that we will only be conducting opening statements today on the two bills that we intend to mark up tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Today, after Mr. Waxman and I offer our statements, all members will be afforded the opportunity to offer their statements, and the Chair asks that all members keep their statements to 3 minutes if they can. And with that, the Chair will recognize myself for 5 minutes. This year, our committee has consistently focused on jobs and security, from health care security to energy security for the American people, and today is no different. We are here to vote on a pair of bills that achieve some of the most fundamental objectives of this committee, keeping Americans safe and healthy while promoting common-sense federal regs that support job creation. I'd like to first speak briefly about an issue that has long been the purview of the Energy and Commerce Committee, chemical safety and security. The Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Program, or CFATS, has been in place since 2007. It builds coordination between owners and operators of certain high-risk facilities and the Department of Homeland Security to guard against acts of terrorism. This is a program that works well and deserves the stability of a longer-term reauthorization, and I certainly commend Reps. Murphy and Green for introducing this bill. From national security, we'll turn our attention to economic security. Throughout the year, each of our subcommittees has focused on job creation and federal barriers to economic growth. And in the Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade Subcommittee, we have seen that a well-intentioned law is threatening serious economic harm. Today, and tomorrow, we will begin the debate to restore common sense and discretion to the agency that protects American consumers. I want to thank Chairman Bono Mack for picking up the torch on this issue of SIPSIA reform and leading the way both thoughtfully and quickly with H.R. 1939. She has carefully crafted this piece of legislation through regular order, and I want to commend the staff, particularly for consistently reaching out to the minority staff and meeting on a good number of occasions, and for making changes to address the concerns raised by those on that side of the aisle. Manufacturers, small business owners, and countless others are depending on us to ease the harsh and inflexible mandate of the 2008 SIPSIA law. Despite the rhetoric, I want to assure my colleagues and all of our constituents that H.R. 1939 keeps alive the spirit in which this committee and the Congress passed the SIPSIA Act. SIPSIA imposed significant new standards, particularly for lead content, and beefed up CPSC to enforce those safety standards. This bill does not undercut those basic safety gains. Instead, it removes the rigidity and inflexibility of SIPSIA and replaces them with focused Commission discretion without compromising children's safety. Giving a government body more flexibility to do its job by focusing on risk does not undermine safety. We have seen numerous bipartisan bills to address many of these issues because we know all products are not the same, and federal law should not treat them that way. The bill preserves the current lead standard content established through SIPSIA and maintains that standard for products for older children. It also keeps the lowest standard of 0.01% intact, applying it to products meant for children where mouthing behavior is most common up through the age of 6. We also recognize that many outdoor products like ATVs and bikes do not pose the same exposure risk as items that are readily and continuously available to children inside their home. To address these product differences, we apply to the outdoor products the same lead limits that the CPSC established for them. Further, the bill addresses one of the most significant costs threatening businesses, jobs, and consumer prices, that is, third-party testing. The chairman of the CPSC has been reminding us on how much safer toys are now than they were a few years back, but those gains are not the result of mandated third-party testing because those requirements have never gone into effect for the toy standards or the lead limits. How do we know products meet the legal standards? Because manufacturers already test to those standards to ensure that they are not breaking the law. They just do it in a more reasonable approach than the methods devised by SIPSIA and CPSC. This draft simply codifies the existing and working process. So I would urge my colleagues to ignore the demagoguers, vote with reason on this issue, and vote for amending the SIPSIA bill. And with that, I yield to the gentlelady from California for 3 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The legislation our committee is considering relative to the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, H.R. 1939, in my view, is a confusing departure from the bipartisan compromise we reached during the previous Congress. The law we have on the books today, thanks to the work of this committee, protects millions of children from lead exposure, toxic chemicals, and dangerous cribs. H.R. 1939 will roll back these critical protections, and I'm urging my colleagues to oppose it. As you made your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, you made it sound as if there was consensus with the minority on this. It's my understanding that you sat down and talked, but that was it. None of the suggestions that were made from this side were taken. So this is not a bipartisan bill. You also said that everything that the committee has done this year is to produce jobs and to produce security. This rips security out from under children in our country. This is a sweet spot for industry. It's a giveaway to them, and you know it. And I'm being harsh because it's children that are going to have to take the brunt of this. This is not a bill that this committee should pass. If there are legitimate issues that should be addressed, loopholes to close, clarifications to codify, let's address them. But when it comes to children's safety, we should err on the side of caution. The legislation before us is a blunt instrument. And make no mistake about it, that's what it is. It's a blunt instrument. It's a gift that manufacturers don't need but are being given, and it comes at the expense of the health and safety of children. On H.R. 908, the Chemical Facilities Anti-Terrorism Standards Act, it's a bill, in my view, that does nothing to improve the CFATS program, which is designed to secure the nation's chemical facilities against terrorist attacks. Instead, we're voting on a bill that doesn't address the risks that are associated with chemical plants at ports and federal facilities, or drinking water facilities, or additional protections for workers, which they need. We should be voting on a comprehensive bill to improve a program that has clear security gaps. Instead, I think we're extending the status quo. So no congratulations to any of us. So between these two bills, lowering the standards for children and extending the status quo when it comes to addressing risks, I don't think the Energy and Commerce Committee in 2011 in May is distinguishing itself. So I urge my colleagues to vote against both of these bills. I don't think they're worthy of passage, and I yield back.
Chair would recognize the gentlelady from California for an opening statement for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Upton, for convening this important markup, as well as for your leadership on a wide range of critical issues which affect all Americans. Simply put, we are running out of time. Unless Congress takes action soon, the CPSC will be forced, against its better judgment, to implement new rules and mandates which will negatively impact U.S. businesses and our economy. The legislation we are considering today marks the first step toward making the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, or CPSIA, the kind of truly landmark legislation it was originally intended to be. While CPSIA has many virtues, there are some unintended consequences of the law as well. Over the past 5 months, we have carefully reviewed the provisions which have turned out to be overreaching, and today we are offering legislation to fix them. Admittedly, this is a careful balancing act, but even the Consumer Product Safety Commission has recognized the problems with CPSIA and has requested greater flexibility in implementing the new law. I want to be absolutely clear about one thing. This legislation will not do anything to weaken safety measures currently in place to protect our children. As a mother, I have very strong, passionate feelings about protecting all children. It's a top priority. But as a former small business owner, I know all too well how unnecessary regulations, even well-intentioned ones, can destroy lives too. Today we have a chance to fulfill CPSIA's potential by working together to make a good law even better. For thousands of businesses which strive to be responsible, let's do what is best for our customers. SIPSEA has consumed an inordinate amount of their time trying to understand how each new regulation and standard will affect them. Unfortunately, many have gone out of business, attributing their demise to some of the burdens of compliance. Today, we are attempting to strike a careful balance. As a nation, we simply cannot afford to lose jobs or stifle innovation because of questionable regulations. It all began with the best of intentions. In 2007, the widely publicized toy recalls for violations of the existing lead paint standard gave way to a new prohibition on lead content in children's products. As interpreted by the Commission, this category goes far beyond just toys to covering sporting goods, library books, ATVs, educational products, CDs, clothing, and many other items. Since becoming chairman of the Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing and Trade, we've had several hearings on this issue, and we've met with all of the key stakeholders, including consumer groups. I've also tried very hard to make this a bipartisan process by getting input from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, including Mr. Waxman, Mr. Dingell, Mr. Butterfield, and Ms. Schakowsky. While I understand that we have some differences of opinion, I hope that we can continue to work together and to improve SIPSEA in ways that benefit all Americans. This legislation gives the Consumer Product Safety Commission the kind of flexibility it needs to accomplish that goal. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair would recognize for an opening statement the ranking member, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we begin consideration of two bills, and I oppose both bills. I agree with Chairman Upton and Bono Mack that changes are needed to the Children's Product Safety Bill we passed in 2008. That legislation was an historic step forward, but like most legislation, it was not perfect. It had some unintended consequences and needs minor adjustments. But instead of refining a good law, the Republican bill goes after the law with a wrecking ball. The result is an assault on children's safety. The Republicans call their bill the Enhancing CPSC Authority and Discretion Act. A better name would be the Unsafe Toy Act. Last month, every Republican member of the committee voted for huge cuts in Medicare. Every Republican on the committee also voted to slash Medicaid spending on nursing home care for seniors and the disabled. This week, the committee has set its sights on toy safety standards for young children. In this committee, we protect the interests of the oil and insurance companies and throw seniors, the disabled, and children under the bus. And there's no clearer illustration of our misplaced priorities than the legislation we are considering today. The Unsafe Toy Act triples the amount of lead allowed in most children's toys. For some children's products, the bill would allow lead levels to increase 100 times or more. The bill eviscerates the requirement that toys imported from China be independently tested for safety. And it would let manufacturers block consumers from posting reports of serious injury caused by toys, household appliances, and other products. Just listen to what the experts are saying about this bill, and I presume they were all consulted. The Consumer Federation of America says that the bill creates huge loopholes. Consumers Union says it will lower standards and roll back safeguards for children and infants, end quote. The American Academy of Pediatrics and 100 other experts in children's health wrote to express their deep concern over the bill because it would have the effect of permitting more lead in toys. Chairman Inez Tenenbaum of the Consumer Product Safety Commission and a majority of the Commission wrote that the bill would effectively revoke key protections and fails to adequately protect the health and safety of American children, end quote. It didn't have to be this way. I went to Chairman Bono Mack weeks ago and said we should work together on this bill. I offered to support targeted relief for makers of ATVs and bicycles, directives to reduce the burden of third-party testing, and efforts to improve product identification in the consumer database. I said I thought we could address all legitimate concerns about the law that had been raised by industry. The staff discussions were cordial, but the message that came back was clear. The Republican majority doesn't want to refine the law. They want to tear it down. I don't understand this approach. Passage of a partisan bill in the House guarantees deadlock in the Senate. Children are endangered, and the industries that need targeted changes get no relief. And that's why I strongly oppose the Unsafe Toy Act. The other bill we're considering, which addresses security at chemical plants, has a different problem. While it does not roll back existing protections, it fails to strengthen them. Our current chemical security laws have loopholes and weaknesses. Drinking water facilities with tanks of chlorine gas could cause widespread devastation in an attack, but they are not subject to chemical security regulations. Chemical facilities that handle nuclear materials are also inexplicably exempt. We urge the majority to work with us in plugging these loopholes, and we ask them to consider protecting whistleblowers and ensuring worker participation in the development of site security plans. But the oil and chemical industries objected, and the Republican majority said no. We did make progress in one area and reached an agreement on harmonizing port and chemical security background checks. This is an important issue in places like Houston, where many employees switch back and forth between working at our ports and nearby oil and chemical facilities. But even with this improvement, the bill is inadequate. It leaves too many chemical-laden facilities vulnerable to terrorism, and that's why I will oppose this legislation as well. Mr. Chairman, so much for bipartisanship. I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair would recognize for an opening statement Dr. Burgess for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in the ranking member's request for bipartisanship, let me just also mention, as far as cuts to Medicare are concerned, that the ranking member brought up, and he has concern about that, but may I remind him that everyone on his side of the dais voted for H.R. 3590, which eventually became the law of the land in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, which contained within it the creation of what is called the Independent Payment Advisory Board, an unelected board of 15 individuals appointed by the President, well paid, who are going to deliver to Congress a menu of cuts to Medicare. Congress can accept or reject that menu of cuts, but if Congress rejects the menu of cuts, Congress is then required to come up with an identical amount of money to cut from Medicare. If Congress cannot agree with itself, and when has that ever happened? But if Congress cannot agree with itself, the Secretary of Health and Human Services will institute those cuts the following April 15th. So, Mr. Ranking Member, if you want to address the cuts in Medicare, you really need to go back to March 23rd of last year when your side voted en masse for this very flawed piece of legislation. We are trying to undo the damage that you inflicted on the American people. Now, as far as the Toy Safety Act is concerned, I voted for H.R. 4040, which came through our committee 2 Congresses ago. I spent a day out at the Consumer Product Safety Commission looking at their procedures and methods, and I did feel that there were some ways where we needed to strengthen the consumer protections for toys. But what happened was we went so far in the other direction, we created lead levels for which no one can test. And as a consequence, libraries and resale shops are unsure of what the road ahead is for them. But probably the most glaring example was when I went to visit motorcycle dealers in my district and found that their entire inventory had been essentially locked up. They could not sell motorcycles if they were marketed as a youth motorcycle. And I will never forget the day that a young man, probably 7 or 8 years of age, blonde hair, resplendent in his motorcycle racing togs, stood in front of a group not far from the Rayburn Horseshoe and said, "Please, Mr. Congressman, if you will let me ride my bike, I promise I will not eat my battery." This was the problem that we visited upon motorcycle dealers in the summer of 2008, when the economy was just perched and ready to collapse. We pushed it over the edge with ill-advised legislation. It's high time we got on about fixing that problem, and I'm grateful to see that we're marking up the bill this week. And with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Chair would recognize the Chairman Emeritus of the full committee, Mr. Dingell, for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your courtesy, and I would like to make some observations here. I have long been concerned about the impracticability of certain provisions in the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, which was reported out of this committee unanimously and which was done in a fully bipartisan fashion. I want to commend Chairman Bono Mack for introducing legislation meant to remedy these concerns. I'm pleased the legislation maintains the age of 12 in the definition of a children's product, and that it makes attempts to provide a practical exemption process from CPSIA's lead limits, and strives to improve the accuracy of information published in the Commission's public database. Those are meritorious. Nevertheless, H.R. 1939 contains provisions that are very troubling to me. I find it difficult to support exempting children's products from third-party testing for lead, phthalate, and mandatory toy standards. Further, I am suspicious that limiting the availability of 100 parts per million lead standard to products for children aged 6 years and younger. These provisions, while wonderfully feasible for industry, are unfortunately not as protective of children's health and safety as I would like to see. As such, I then have reservations over H.R. 1939, which will probably preclude me from supporting it. Before closing, I would like to express my disappointment that this bill did not benefit from the open and inclusive process that I insisted upon when I was chairman, and we wrote CPSIA, and the matter was dealt with in the most open and cooperative fashion from start to end. It surely goes without saying that the Senate will now not pass H.R. 1939, which means we're unfortunately wasting a genuinely rare opportunity to craft bipartisan, moderate legislation that stands a reasonable chance of being signed into law by the President. By extension, we will be providing no relief to industry, which has gone to great lengths at great cost to convince us of the necessity of easing statutory burdens. And I would observe there are statutory burdens here which make the legislation very hard to be called workable. I hope the committee will bear these matters in mind when moving forward on this and other matters. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your courtesy, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes Mr. Gingrey for 3 minutes.
Madam Chairwoman, I want to thank you for calling today's markup on two bills that demonstrate the broad jurisdiction of this committee. I commend Chairman Shimkus of the Environment and Economy Subcommittee and Chairwoman Bono Mack of the Commerce, Manufacturing and Trade Subcommittee for their work in moving these two bills through regular order through their respective subcommittees. H.R. 908, the full implementation of the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Act, reauthorized the CFATS program that was first created in 2006 and is set to expire in October. This legislation extends this important program through 2017. The CFATS program authorized the Department of Homeland Security to regulate facilities containing chemicals for anti-terrorism security purposes using risk-based standards for facility security. Furthermore, H.R. 908 demonstrates important fiscal restraint by authorizing funds below the levels enacted for fiscal year 2011 for a 7-year period. I applaud the work of the authors of this bill, Dr. Murphy from Pennsylvania, Mr. Green from Texas, for working in a largely bipartisan manner to move this legislation forward. Madam Chairwoman, as a member of the Commerce, Trade, and Consumer Protection Subcommittee in the 111th, I had the opportunity to learn the impact that the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act has had on small businesses due to mounting unintended consequences. From legislation that was only 63 pages long, the Consumer Product Safety Commission now has a set of regulations that are 2,500 pages long. Madam Chairwoman, H.R. 1939, the Enhancing CPSC Authority and Discretion Act, will make important steps in reforming CPSC. Clearly, some of the products that are currently subjected to the regulation pose no threat to children. Due to the testing methods that will be adopted if we do not act, children will not have the ability to purchase a baseball mitt, a brass musical instrument, even a microscope to be used in a classroom. If our end goal is to eradicate lead from the products that parents buy for their children, it shouldn't mean that we may also be sacrificing the promotion of exercise, appreciation of the arts, and STEM education in the process. That was not the intention of CPSC. H.R. 1939 restores the needed flexibility and common sense needed to keep the safety of our children in mind, but in a practical way. Madam Chair, we recognize the need to reform SIPSIA in the 111th Congress, and CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, agrees. I commend you, Madam Chairwoman, for your continued work on this issue, for producing legislation that will keep our children safe without the unintended consequences that negatively impact small businesses. Madam Chairwoman, I support both bills that will be under consideration of the full committee during this markup, and I ask all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the same, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes Mr. Rush for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Madam Chairman, I want to say good afternoon to you and to the Chairman Upton and the Ranking Member Waxman. I'm extremely disappointed and disturbed by the majority's decision to mark up landmark legislation that is effectively protecting our children from dangerous and hazardous products and toys. The SIPSIA, Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act of 2008, also known as Rush Prior, was passed in the House by a whopping bipartisan vote of 407 to 0. And Madam Chairman, I want to highlight the fact that 192 of those votes were Republicans, including some members of this very committee. The majority's bill, H.R. 1939, the Enhancing CPSC Authority and Discretion Act of 2011, is a vehicle for shielding industry from liability, clamping down on consumers' rights of free speech to share information about defective products with the CPSC and other parents and consumers, and categorically exempting some toy and children's product makers from carrying out third-party testing obligations. The bill is also inappropriately named that it will weaken and not enhance the CPSC's authority to regulate and verify the safety of children's products. H.R. 1939 does not resolve legitimate issues regarding the extent to which targeted relief should be afforded to industry. Rather, it is a vehicle that the majority is using to roll back needed and crucial product safeguards and protections for children, including those who are in my district. According to the Chicago Department of Public Health, the greater Inglewood community in my district is Chicago's worst neighborhood, and it is one of the nation's highest rates of lead poisoning among children. This is not a trivial matter. Lead affects children's behavior and is undoubtedly linked to brain damage, reduced IQ, hearing impairments, and learning disabilities. And in those higher doses, lead has been shown to damage children's kidneys and central nervous systems, as well as causing anemia, coma, convulsions, and even death. Madam Chairman, Madam Chairlady, I would ask that the committee do vote against this particular measure, because I think that this measure is ill-advised, ill-timed, and it does not address the problems of which it's been suggested that they will address. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Barton for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you and Chairman Upton for the markup. We're here to mark up two bills, the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Act and the Consumer Product Safety Commission Authority and Discretion Act. We have a bipartisan agreement on the Chemical Facilities Act, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that except to say I think it's an excellent bill. I want to spend most of my opening statement on the CPSC bill. I do want to commend Dr. Murphy and Mr. Green of Texas for introducing the bipartisan bill. I think that's an excellent piece of work. On the CPSC reform bill, I did agree yesterday to be a co-sponsor of the bill. I think it's well known that in the last Congress, I tried to get a reform bill passed without any success, and in the prior Congress to that worked as ranking member with then Chairman Dingell to pass the bill that we're now trying to reform today. The bill that, with the changes that have been made, should be a bipartisan bill. It gives certainty in the consumer marketplace and also to the manufacturer of the products that the bill's covered. The bill that was passed back in 2008 has shown itself to be almost impossible to implement in its current form because it doesn't have the discretion necessary to give the Commission the discretion necessary to adjust the bill, the contingencies in the real world. Our children's health is obviously of paramount importance. In this bill, I think we have paid the absolute proper concern to children's health, but we've also realized that in the marketplace there are certain products that can be used in a safe and efficient way, and some standards can be slightly changed and some discretion can be given to the CPSC. The bill before us allows that discretion. It also allows sufficient time for manufacturers and third parties to make appropriate changes that need to be made to comply with the bill, with the law. So, Madam Chairwoman, I want to thank you for your excellent leadership on the CPSC reform bill, and I look forward to the markup tomorrow.
Thank the gentleman. He yields back his time, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Green for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for holding markups today on H.R. 908, legislation to reauthorize the CFATS program. We've already gave our full opening statements on this legislation before the recess, so I'll try to be brief. In working with Chairman Shempers, we were able to come to an agreement on continuity on background checks, which is an issue of vital importance, not only to the workers but our industry. This provision would bring clarity to the CFATS program, ensure workers who are employees of a company that own land and waterside facility would be able to go between the plants without initial background checks if they already passed one background check. I understand an amendment will be offered to push the authorization out to 2018. I also want to maintain energy and commerce jurisdiction of CFATS, but I have reservations about authorizing this program for 8 years instead of 7 or even 5, which I originally requested. I also understand the CR authorized the current CFATS appropriations until the end of the year. That ensures the program is funded for 1 year. Pushing out the authorization date to 2018 gives the program one additional year without Congress having to revisit the program. I'm uncomfortable with that additional year, and I'd be offering an amendment tomorrow to bring the reauthorization date to 2016. I also intend to offer an amendment to include workers in the development of the site security plans, workers' unmatched knowledge of the facilities in which they work. They also are the last line of defense and the first affected by the attack. It makes sense to include them in the development of site security plans. These amendments pertain to issues that were also important to me during the debate last year of H.R. 2868, which I supported when it passed out of this committee and the House. H.R. 2868 was not perfect, but it included substantial compromises to permanently extend chemical and water security regulations while increasing worker protections and providing important safeguards to chemical facilities and water systems. I believe Mr. Waxman will be offering an amendment with germane provisions of H.R. 2868 tomorrow, and I intend to support it. However, I recognize the current political reality and some of the provisions of that bill were not acceptable to the new House majority. H.R. 908 is not perfect either, but I do believe we need some surety of that the program will be continued to be funded. A year-to-year authorization, which could be held hostage by a political budget debate, does not offer safety assurances, job security, or guarantees to industry that their investments in safety are a wise investment. Overall, the safety of these facilities far outweighs any political debate we have today. And I'm not entirely happy with H.R. 908, but it offers some continuity to the system and step forward on some issues of concern to me. Mr. Chairman, I also wish to share my reservations concerning enhancing CPSC Authority and Discretion Act. I'm certainly willing to look at targeted relief to industry and vendors while maintaining the protections of CPSIA provides. However, I believe that many of the changes offered by the majority go too far in weakening the original intent of CPSIA, and particularly those measures designed to protect children. With that, I yield back my time.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Shimkus for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on working on your piece of legislation. Look forward to supporting it. You know, after that bill was passed, signed into law, we heard from just tons of small business folks about the inability to comply with this. So giving the CPSC the flexibility needed to make judgments based upon the need is timely, and it really addresses a concern on jobs and job creation, because this regulation could not be complied with and it would affect jobs. So again, congratulations on that, and I look forward to casting my vote in support of that. I also want to thank my ranking member, Mr. Green, his staffer, Abby, and the work we've done on CFATs. And we've moved in a positive direction. It's not as far as Mr. Green would like for us to go. He'll have a chance to offer some amendments, and we'll move that process forward. But all in all, it was working together in good camaraderie to try to come to some common grounds. The first, I'll be offering a couple amendments. One will extend, and this is where there's a little bit of confusion because of the CR already extended it for a year. We'll have an amendment to extend it from 2017 to 2018, making it the 7-year time frame that in essence does as long as of time that we can extend it out without having the reauthorization. This is an important aspect in just planning for the industry and making sure that their sites are secure. The second amendment is related to the background checks and in many cases security credentials. This is the one we work closely with Mr. Green. It's very important to him. There's a duplicate system, and this saves either the worker or the industry another filing fee and another processing check in that system. We're very excited. We know there'll be some amendments, but the industry needs certainty. We need to make sure our facilities are secure. CFAS is designed to do just that, and this reauthorization is timely. And with that, thank you, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back, and the chair recognizes Mr. Butterfield for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, I want to join the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, and say that I too am disappointed by the two bills we are marking up today, and I cannot offer my support for either one of them. 2 years ago, when this committee was considering an overhaul to the chemical facilities anti-terrorism standards, I said then that it was our responsibility to ensure the security of these facilities and that a hearty extension was needed to address the major gaps in the program. Now, 2 years later, and this legislative approach offers fewer answers, even as the threat remains constant. H.R. 908 fails to deal with any of the problems we fixed with H.R. 2868, particularly with respect to worker safety, protection, and participation. The current CFATS program does nothing to guarantee workers' rights during the personal surety process, leaving them without redress against negative employment decisions. Further, workers are the first line of defense in guaranteeing site implementation integrity, site security plans, so they must have whistleblower protection, something not included in the bill. Lastly, workers must be guaranteed input into the development of site security plans, as they will have a unique understanding of the site's vulnerability and a vested personal interest in the site's defense. Much like the Chemical Facilities Bill, H.R. 1939 undoes years of work to the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, which is intended to protect our children from harmful products. I'll remind my colleagues that H.R. 4040 passed the House by a vote of 424 to 1. With a vote like that, it seems like there was a consensus. This draft bill does not preserve protections for children from potential harms. Children in some daycare centers shouldn't be placed in cribs that don't meet up-to-date and rigorous safety standards. Lead content limits should not be stretched to benefit industry and to the detriment of our children when only a very narrow universe of products can't seem to meet the limits. and mandatory third-party testing for a large number of children's products made by even the largest of manufacturers shouldn't be eliminated to alleviate the difficulties faced by smaller businesses. A toy box too great. And I will therefore, Madam Chairman, oppose H.R. 1939, a bill which I will now call the Unsafe Toy Act of 2011. Shame on my Republican friends for their failure to work with us. You're missing an opportunity to fix the problems that you complain of. You know, certainly, this bill will not pass the Senate, and the small businesses that you purport to help will not be helped at all. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a representative of a state that has a substantial chemical sector that employs thousands of Louisianians, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the issue of chemical security, facility security today. The CFATS program has successfully safeguarded our nation's chemical facilities from attacks, and extending the program remains a national security priority. By passing H.R. 908, we will offer regulatory certainty which will preserve good American jobs while also providing the necessary security to keep the facilities, the employees who work there, and the American public safe. Continuation of this effort remains critical to our nation's security. My home state of Louisiana, and especially South Louisiana, is home to numerous chemical facilities, and we value the goals of the CFATS program in keeping these facilities and others across the country safe. It is important that we extend authorization to this program, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this bipartisan legislation. Regarding the other bill we're marking up tomorrow, H.R. 1939, I applaud Chairman Upton and Subcommittee Chair Bono Mack for placing such a high priority on correcting burdensome provisions of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. Many provisions in that bill were determined to be an impediment to the daily operations and vitality of a variety of businesses across the nation while doing nothing to protect children's health. The provisions that we will consider reforming tomorrow are classic examples of Washington overreach, which has ultimately detracted from the important task of protecting children from a variety of health risks while costing countless businesses to close their doors and thousands of Americans to lose their jobs. I support eliminating red tape and unnecessary regulatory burdens where appropriate, as well as sustaining the Consumer Product Safety Commission's discretionary authority to act on an established risk. I thank the Chair, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Schakowsky for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sad to say I'm opposed to both pieces of legislation that we're considering today, but I want to focus my remarks on H.R. 1939, the Enhancing CPSC Authority and Discretion Act of 2011. Calling this bill an enhancement of anything is laughable. We've all acknowledged that there are some technical fixes that would allow the CPSC to implement the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act better. But despite numerous efforts by Mr. Waxman and his staff, the majority has refused to move forward to address shared concerns in a bipartisan way. The original Consumer Product Safety and Improvement Act passed the House by a vote of 424 to 1 and was a model of bipartisan cooperation and legislative achievement. I know because I was an integral part of that and on the conference committee. Instead of working together to truly enhance the law and design a measure that would pass both the House and the Senate and be signed into law, the majority is insisting on pushing forward a bill that takes us backwards in terms of children's product safety. Prior to the passage of the CPSIA, our children were the test subjects for safety, and guess what? Some of them died. I appreciate the efforts of Chairwoman Bono Mack has made to restore third-party testing for durable infant products, including cribs, and expand limits on lead in children's metal jewelry to apply up to age 9. But in the context of this bill as a whole, these changes are insufficient. The bill would allow certain child care centers to use dangerous cribs indefinitely, even though the CPSC has already agreed to delay implementation of the standards for these facilities. And even while ensuring testing for durable infant goods, this bill would undermine third-party testing for countless other children's products. It would place so many burdens on the CPSC that mandating third-party testing for lead, phthalates, and the toy safety standard would be nearly impossible. We have been saving children's lives and health with the CPSIA, and criticism that trivializes and even mocks the law have no place here. We are willing to make changes, but not willing to put children's lives at risk. I cannot support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me just say to some of my colleagues who are so vociferously against H.R. 1939, many of us were in the committee room. I was one of the conferees when we passed the 2008 CPSIA bill. And as a conferee, I can attest our intentions were simply to protect our consumers and not hinder manufacturers with unintended consequences. And I think all of us on this committee agree that protecting our consumers is a high priority, and so that we want to do that. But what these folks are complaining about is that they're saying, well, the bill passed, I think, 424 to 1, and that's true, but I think all of us had reservations. We had reservations in the conference, and we realized there were a lot of problems. So all we're doing in the majority is coming back and taking those reservations, and now that we know more about it, is allaying our fears and being responsible and trying to fix this bill. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to take another look in Congress at a bill that passed, perhaps overwhelmingly, to see if there's any problems. The other thing is that in the bill we had so much third-party testing that it was omnipresent, and this bill moves it back a little bit, so that's only affected by the most dangerous aspects. Then the third-party testing comes in, and so it's really not necessary to have it across the board. Perhaps the Democrats that's one of their biggest complaints. The second piece of legislation is H.R. 908, which, as Republican majority, we passed in 2007, fiscal year 2007, and it's basically going to sunset, and we honestly feel that it shouldn't sunset. I don't think the Democrats on that side of the aisle want to go forward and not vote for this bill. The title of it is, would basically a chemical facility anti-terrorist standard program, CFATS. It's very important, and if it's not reenacted, it'll expire in, pretty soon. So we need to fully implement and continue the evaluation of this program. I think it's a sensible approach that allows the effective implementation of CFAT standards. I think it ensures the safety of chemical plants while avoiding the unnecessary cost, complications, and litigation of legislation debated last session that sought to restrict chemical usage and to achieve real facility security goals. So I think we have two bills here, and I think one is perhaps more controversial than the other, and I think the more we look at it, we'll realize that both of them are good, and I urge my colleagues, and I ask unanimous consent that my written opening statement be part of the record. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady. Today we mark up two bills. The first of these bills, the Unsafe Toy Act of 2011, allows for higher levels of toxic chemicals to be used in children's toys. And the other permits industry to make these very same children's toys using more dangerous chemicals and processes, even when safer ones exist. With these bills, House Republicans have replaced the old DuPont advertising slogan, "Better Living Through Chemistry," with a new one, "Better Living for Chemical Company Executives." Let's explore the periodic table of dangerous elements that is contained in these Republican bills. First, we have the element lead, which is a dense, flexible, and highly toxic heavy metal that can permanently damage the nervous system and cause brain disorders. In their latest attack on public health, this Republican proposal rolls back the lead standards for toys and other products, increasing the chances that young children will once again be at risk of lead poisoning. Next are phthalates, which are added to plastics to increase their flexibility and transparency, and are used in a multitude of everyday household products, including rattles, teethers, food containers, and cosmetics. Although they are made of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, elements that form the building blocks of life, the hundreds of millions of pounds of these chemicals that are produced every year have been shown to cause birth defects, cancer, and other health problems. Despite this, the bill greatly expands the number of children's products that phthalates could be legally used in. No periodic table would be complete without the highly reactive substances beloved by the chemical industry called halogens. One halogen, fluorine, which is used by oil refineries, can penetrate tissue and dissolve the human skeleton and can also lead to cardiac arrest. The chemical industry continues to use fluorine despite the existence of widely used and safer alternatives. Another halogen, chlorine, is used in large quantities to disinfect water, even though, again, a totally benign and cost-effective alternative used by numerous other drinking water utilities is available. One mishandled rail car transporting chlorine could produce a deadly cloud that could kill or injure 100,000 people in 30 minutes. In the last Congress, Democrats used industry input to develop a bill that would require the use of cost-effective alternatives to these toxic chemicals. But the Republicans are insisting that industry be allowed to use inherently dangerous technologies and chemicals in perpetuity, no matter the risk to public health, the economy, and security. In a 1987 Superman comic book, the mild-mannered Clark Kent had a deleterious encounter with a vat of toxic chemicals, which caused him to mutate into a superpowered version of Chemo, a super tall supervillain. These bills are the legislative equivalent of Chemo. And as this particular comic book is subtitled, these Republican bills turn laws that are supposed to protect public health into laws that will cause better dying through chemistry. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and the chair would just point out to the gentleman that the chair is hoping you will sing again for the committee shortly. It's been a long time since you've sung for the full committee, so I'm hoping you will sing sometime.
That I will?
Yes.
Oh, great. The
Not
audience
right.
isn't here yet. Tomorrow, when we go to the markup, I'll work out.
California dreaming again. So
California scheming is.
Seeing no other members present for opening statements, the chair now calls up H.R. 908 as amended and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 908 to extend the authority of the Secretary of Homeland Security to maintain the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Program.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. For the information of members, we are now on H.R. 908. The committee will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I remind members that the chair will give priority recognition to amendments offered on a bipartisan basis. I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow, perhaps hearing a song or two. 10 o'clock, better news for California members. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So again, remind the chair, the chair will give priority recognition to amendments offered on a bipartisan basis. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and the committee is now recessed.